Hello everyone. So today let us take a look at this question on the community. And this question, I'm sure many of you will relate to this. And I'll of course not read the whole question. I'll just summarize it for you. Let us say you're using sprints. You're using Scrum board in Jira software, and you're very happy with it. Maybe you're excited, and you have let us say an epic with some stories. Now when you plan the work, you will of course plan those stories to be delivered in your sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, and so on. Now some of these stories will of course not get finished on time, and in that case of course you will move it back to the or not back to the backlog, or maybe you can move it to the sprint, the upcoming sprint, or and when you do that, your reports will reflect. So your typical report is, of course, velocity report or velocity chart or sprint burn down chart or burn up chart, whatever you want to call it. Now the thing is, when you finish a sprint, you're based on the number of stories you committed and you finished between start and end will be your report, right? And that is not going to change. And if you are moving the stories from sprint 1 to sprint 2, then of course, it means that you were not able to finish and you're now going to finish it, or you're planning to finish it in the next sprint, right? That is how things are. Now imagine there is a story where you have done, it's a development task. Now when it comes to development, of course, no, it is not just development. You will first develop it, then you will test it, and then you will deploy it, and maybe something else, right? Now, all of these things might not happen in one sprint. It is perfectly okay. And if that is the case, ideally, and I'm talking about, of course, and again, it is not always possible for everyone. Ideally, you should have 3 tasks. Task number 1 would be your dev task. Task number 2 would be your testing task. Task number 3 could be your deployment task. And I also know from my experience that it is also not feasible all the time, because I encounter these things all the time. And that is where, because Jira is a tool, and if you're trying to follow something that the tool dictates, or agile principles dictates, then either you're doing it or you're not doing it. There is nothing in between. For example, if you are looking at the velocity chart or a burn down chart, then it will show you that you were not able to finish it on time, and that is fine. Totally okay with it. So one option is that live with it, move it to the next sprint, and have an understanding that okay, we were not able to deliver it. And I think personally, you should actually create different tasks, especially if the task is done by another team. For example, if you are a developer, of course, as a developer, you don't really want your reports to be messed up, right? You should deliver your work and done with it. Like, okay, I have delivered. My KPI is good. But if you're keeping the same story open for so long, then of course your reports will be messed up. And we all know this. It is not really something hidden in Jira. That is how Jira works. And I don't really see any reason, although I also mentioned that it is not always feasible, but just try to create 3 tasks straight, like upfront. And you can of course use automation, like create a story. And if you're on Jira Data Center, then create those stories upfront all the time. Like if you have a story, then create a dev task automatically when it is closed, or not a dev task, or a test task, or something else. And it also depends on at what level you're doing testing. Are you doing testing at the story level, or are you doing testing at the epic level? Again, from my experience, a lot of people do testing at the epic level. Like they wait for something significant to finish and then they test it. And that is why it makes sense to have that test cases or test campaigns, whatever you want to call it, created under an epic. And you can do that, of course, using Zephyr. And the idea is that Jira fundamentally says that create a separate task for the individual. Don't really keep the same task open for too long. Of course, it happens that you will probably reassign it to someone else. But if you're trying to follow Agile by book, which I know is not really possible for most of the organization's teams, then just live with it. It's totally okay. And if you're not really, I mean, first of all, consider creating a separate task or separate stories, one for testing, one for dev, one for validation. If you want your reports to look good and nice. Otherwise, it's okay. I mean, to be honest, end of the day, delivering a feature, good quality software matters more, rather than keeping your Jira reports looking perfectly okay. People actually focus too much on the tool. I think Jira is a tool, and use the tool for collaboration. For you try to use the benefits and have the end goal in mind. Like, first of all, if you think that is the case, like you're keeping the story open for too long until it is delivered, fine. I mean, just move it to the next sprint. In that case, of course, don't really rely on the burn down chart or velocity chart too much. Use your judgment, and you need a good project manager or so-called scrum masters in those cases to manage the work. And always look at your outcome. Like, are you delivering as a team on a timely basis? Are you doing good as a business? I think. I mean, of course, there are a lot of factors involved, but usually you're able to figure out by looking at your product, your customers, and Jira usually, of course, it will reflect the way you work and, of course, your culture. And at the same time, if you are reaching out to a consultant or an admin for customizing and making the perfect reports, perfect configurations, that is usually not the case. And we as a consultant, we always try to understand the outcome rather than the perfect Jira configurations. All right, that is it. That is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new today. Thank you very much. Bye bye.